Hey everyone, James Azar here with the CyberHub podcast on our Tech Corner inaugural episode with a very, very dear friend of our old show joining us to kick off our very, very new show, Dr. Nigel Smart. Nigel?
Hi.
How are you, good sir? Yeah, elbows.
Yeah. We're on day 45 of the lockdown here in Belgium. It's getting better. People are starting to go back to work next week. Schools are proposing to be opened in 2 or 3 weeks. So it looks like the light's at the end of the tunnel for now.
Yeah, I think it's summertime. Like, you couldn't keep people inside any longer as summer kind of creeps around the corner. I mean, a lot of people have given up, as a foregone conclusion of giving up their holidays, right?
Yeah.
In Europe, they call them holidays. Here in America, we call them vacations. So I'm using my European. I've decided as my background that I am going to put the globe. And the globe, for a lot of people who are watching, the map that's behind my head has everywhere I've been in the world, kind of as pins. And the cool thing I'm going to start doing is, as our listeners can actually let us know where they're listening from, and we're going to start pinning them on there as well.
In different colors.
In different colors.
Cool.
Yeah, we're going to pin all of our listeners in blue so that they can all... we can show everywhere we have listeners in the globe. But, you know, I will say, people have given up their holidays. That's crazy.
Yeah, so here borders are shut, so it's very unclear whether, even if the place you were going, I mean, we can't even in Belgium, if you had a spare house by the beach, they've got roadblocks, so you're not even allowed to drive to your spare house by the beach.
Yeah, that's nice. That's horrible. That's
because they don't want too many people there, because the hospitals are more in the big towns in the inland than they are. So you don't want everyone going to the seaside. That's the thing. It makes sense.
It does in a way. I mean, we live in a new reality, obviously, and you've been really, really, really busy, Nigel. You were one of the authors of a privacy kind of government overreach app tracing document that's been adopted and it's been covered by multiple news outlets.
Yeah,
and
we've had a hell of a 2 weeks.
So let's talk a little bit about that. You and I, a few weeks ago, when this whole COVID-19 thing started, so we met before this pandemic. We were face to face before this pandemic was really a pandemic. Yeah, we were not practicing social distancing.
No,
but we were not shaking hands.
Yeah, but we were coughing into our elbows,
and then we were shaking with our elbows. That's always fascinated me. And so you and I have gone through this last 60 days or so of kind of being at RSA in San Francisco and hanging out there, to getting to where we are today, where now we're seeing more app tracing and essentially what do they call it? Medical tracing?
Contact tracing or
contact tracing, I'm sorry.
Or proximity tracing
of people who get COVID-19. Now, there's been a lot of noise around privacy on this and overreach. And so talk a little bit about your guys' paper, and then what was your desired kind of result?
Okay, so what we have is a solution that is being rolled out in a number of countries. We've definitely got confirmed Estonia, Switzerland, Austria. Other countries look like they're going to be adopting something similar. There's trials in Finland, Spain, Ireland. There's something similar going on in Canada, and it's very similar to stuff that's going on in the US. There's a bunch of people up in University of Washington, in Seattle, working with some software companies up there to build something very similar. So what this does is that you have your mobile phone, and your mobile phone has a Bluetooth signal in it, and the Bluetooth signal will send out random values, and then the other phones around will collect the random values. Now, to do this, we've had to talk with Google and Apple, and so Google and Apple on the 1st of May will be changing their API to enable these contact tracing apps to be done in a privacy-preserving manner. So they're going to be basically adopting what has been proposed by the team, which is mainly being led out of Switzerland by EPFL and ETH. And the idea is that if everyone has a phone, is the idea first. Everyone has their Bluetooth enabled, and everyone goes around with this app. Your phone records all of the people you've seen. Not the people. It records these random identifiers sent out by the Bluetooth signal. And then if you are diagnosed as having COVID-19, the doctor will tell the app you have COVID-19, and then your app will take your random numbers and load them to a server. So you're already got the disease. Your random numbers on the server, they just look like random numbers. Now I now ping the server every so often, and I see those random numbers, and I go, oh, I was with one of those random numbers 2 weeks ago. I should now get tested because I was with them for a certain period of time. It wouldn't register your number unless I was with you for a certain period of time within a certain distance. So here, what happens is that the person who doesn't have the disease reveals no information, so their privacy is protected. And the person who does have the disease, now, if you do have the disease, in most countries that are trying to control the disease, you will go through a process, what's called contact tracing anyway. So you would reveal to the authorities where you've been in a physical interview, where someone sits down with a piece of paper and records where you've been, what types of people you met, etc., etc., etc. So your privacy as someone who has the disease is not infringed any more than it would be normally, but the person without the disease doesn't reveal anything at all because the matching is done on their phone. This is what's called a decentralized system. It's good. Some countries were or are proposing a centralized system. In particular, were Germany, but they've since changed their mind after we put a lot of pressure on them, which was my 2 weeks ago big letter that we wrote, which is in the press. But currently, the two main countries that are holding out for a centralized system are the UK and France. But what can you do? The French and the British.
But they're holding out based on what I've read. Their reasoning behind it is, really, we don't trust that the decentralized system would give us enough information in order to be able to contain this as quickly, and we don't have the bandwidth to maybe interview people on a one-by-one basis. We don't know how trustworthy some of the people we're interviewing are. We do know that
there's two things. So in France, what they want is more information. Now, what they really want is more information from the infected person. And you could always get more information from the infected person by actually adding to the app the stuff that the infected person actually has and giving that to the authorities. So what they're asking for is your location where you're infected. It could record your GPS signals and upload your GPS signals, but you're infected, so that's the same as just talking to you, yeah? So in some sense, they could have that additional information with the decentralized system. The UK is slightly different in that the UK doesn't have enough testing or basically anything to be able to run a proper app in the first place, because what you need from the good contact tracing, you need someone to medically confirm that you have the disease. So in the UK version, you can just declare randomly that you've got the disease. And of course, then there's an attack in the sense that you could just have people just randomly going, I've got COVID, I've got COVID, I've got COVID. Everyone could be like a Spartacus moment. I've got COVID, I've got COVID, I've got COVID. And so they then have to have a centralized system to be able to protect against that. But the problem there is that their health system hasn't got enough testing facilities to be able to start having a proper app to start with. So they've got some issues in the UK to do with their entire response.
The UK has an issue also with NHS. In unrelated to all of this, NHS has always been a challenge for a lot of the British people. And now the system is really overworked. It's underfunded. They don't have all the tools. I know that Boris Johnson has been making phone calls asking for more respirators, for more equipment, because they just don't have it.
And then and what's interesting is actually in the UK, what's happened is that when companies have actually phoned up the government and said, we've got this stuff, the government hasn't responded. So the companies in the UK are selling this stuff to other countries because the UK government can't get its act together to buy it off the UK companies.
Yeah, I mean, it's very interesting to see the difference in how every nation kind of deals with this. I was fascinated early on watching the Israeli coverage of how they ended up sending the Israeli Ministry of Defense out and the Mossad and other agencies to go out to other nations and buy testing kits and swabs and respirators. And you're like, they sent out their Ministry of Defense, but for Israel, they used all available resources to really kind of get their hands on it.
And of course, the Ministry of Defense is really good at logistics. That's what military do. They kill people and do logistics.
It's been very interesting because that kind of brings up the second aspect of this whole privacy with these contact tracing apps, right? For example, in Israel, which was one of the first countries to launch, and you and I spoke about this about a month ago, where they launched the Magen app to really trace people. And the person running the app was the Israeli Shabak, the Israel version of the FBI. And so that's been really, really fascinating, because in other nations, we're kind of seeing, well, who's really going to run this? And you don't see anyone saying, well, who's collecting this information? And it's just kind of like a random government repository of information that anyone could possibly access and do with it what they want.
Yeah.
And is that the big fear? I mean, is that kind of the academic? You guys had 170 people signed this document.
Oh, this was the UK letter yesterday. Our one, we've got the international letter. We've got 500 odds to sign. So we got 500 to sign. So that's one of the concerns that if you build one of these apps, and the European Parliament has passed recommendations which back up the Swiss design, which is called DP3T. So the Swiss design is completely anonymous. It protects the privacy of everyone, bar what would normally leak in a contact tracing situation. And so it meets all the data protection things. But then what you see agencies in some countries want to get extra information that, hey, if everyone's got this app in their thing, then we can trace people after the event. We can repurpose it for other applications.
Yeah, I think I always kind of look at this and just gently remind people that every time there's been some sort of disaster, attack, major pandemic, government tends to go in and grasp for something and they never give it back. They just don't give it back. And I think that's the biggest fear that a lot of people have, especially when you're in cyber. I think in cyber, we're in a very special place. And I say that because cybersecurity as a whole is defense, and it's defense and you can say active defense against cybersecurity threats that originate outside of your borders. Cyber has no borders. So the cooperation between cybersecurity professionals and government cybersecurity professionals tend to look at government as a partner. And in privacy, we'll look at the government and say, we want to keep you in check. And in a lot of organizations, when you're doing both, you end up in a position where, do we trust them? Do we not trust them? How do I do this? And it's very interesting in my conversations with CISOs. I often, when I ask them, well, who do you report to? And if they say legal, and I can always grasp that there's a difference, because when they report to legal, they look at government not as a partner. They may go to an InfraGard meeting, but they're not really into the information sharing because they report to legal, and legal doesn't want to share anything. And whereas it's different when you're reporting to a CIO who says, yeah, go get all the help we can possibly get our hands on.
Yeah.
If we kind of transition from, kind of the contact tracing, and we look a little bit more on cyber, we're seeing, as you've stated early on, people are starting to get back to work slowly but surely. We're seeing a new reality of social distancing. I don't think every office is going to bring employees back in.
Yeah, and if they do, it's going to be, so what we're seeing here, because we're transitioning back, we're seeing that the offices that are bringing people in, you might have certain numbers, because you need to keep social distance, so you can't pack them into those cubes like have been in the past. You might only bring in people on a Monday and a Wednesday, and the other team bring in on a Tuesday and a Thursday. We know that a lot of banks and broadcasters that have had to maintain their offices over the entire period, and have actually physical locations, that they've actually had team A, team B, team C. And so that the teams never meet. So they've always, so if team A gets infected, it only kills 50%, say, well, not kills, sorry, that's the wrong word. Only, that's completely the wrong word. I take that back. It only takes out 50% of the capability whilst those people recover from the illness. So you have that. So I have this dichotomy: is you don't bring everybody back at once. You might bring them back in sectors, and this then causes, this could cause social problems. And I don't think everyone's going to go back. There's a lot of people go, actually, this life's quite good. I can plan my work. I don't have to sit in a traffic jam for 2 hours a day, sit on a tube. So I think that you're going to see a lot of more people working from home. There was even a report I saw that there's some big software house, I can't remember which one, in San Francisco, actually said we're actually, this is working so well, we're actually getting rid of our physical location in downtown San Francisco. Because they can it's cheaper for them to hire a hotel every 2 or 3 months for a big team meeting, and then everybody work at home via Zoom or other devices, which may be more secure than Zoom. We can come back to that maybe later. And then that's cheaper. So I think we'll see different ways of people working.
Yeah, it's fascinating. I've said early on when this whole thing happened, I go, commercial real estate is going to absolutely collapse over the next 3 to 5 years, and commercial real estate developers and property owners are going to have to rethink how they're going to remodel their business. I feel like a lot of people are going towards what you exactly just said. I was at WeWork. I did my first face-to-face meeting this week in over 2 months. It was brilliant. In about 2 months, sorry, because I did a bunch of face-to-face meetings when I was in Israel. And it was great. So we met at WeWork, and WeWork was empty. They had more cleaning people there than actual people in the facility. It was a ghost town. And I'm looking at that and I go, WeWork, if they're smart right now, if they have any inch of a brain, I'd be going to all the big Fortune 500s going hey, come do a WeWork membership. We're going to create a very big open space. Don't go to hotels. Come to WeWork and give it to your employees, and it'll cost you $100 a month per employee to use our WeWork facility outside of your 2 major locations or 3 major locations. And they can do meetings and blah, blah, blah. And just go out there, and if they do that, they'll generate a ton of business.
And also, there's this other thing is that you're going to see people. I mean, I mentioned Zoom. So Zoom has done really, really good. I mean, so they started the Corona lockdown with a completely insecure system, and it's been improved. They've got some really, really good people on board. They've really tied things up. But I think what Zoom are doing is going to be in everything. So we're going to have more issues to do with bring your own devices. We're going to have people who are going to be working remotely. So the entire infrastructure of corporates to allow people to work remotely in a secure manner with corporate data is going to change. I think this is going to accelerate a lot.
Yeah, I will say this. People are more effective. I think some people are more effective working from home. Some jobs you can't really work from home. For security, I think that our transition of security tools to the cloud and away from a server room is going to be where the spend is going to be over the next 2 years. I think a lot of these physical SOCs are going to start transitioning to a cloud SOC, and you're going to have instead of a 25-person SOC team, it'll be 10. And like you said, it'll be teams, right? And that's how it's going to be. Automation is playing a big role for security right now. How do you see security really evolving now that things are starting to kind of, I want to say, get back to this new normal? How do you see security evolving?
I don't know. I think it's going to be different compared to the past, but I think we're going to see more, like I said, I think we're going to see more remote working. And I think security is going to be much more interested more interested in the devolved enterprise. The fact that there are no borders, an enterprise can be a completely virtual thing with servers in the cloud, people working, and the idea that you have any form of physical building or anything is, for a lot of enterprises, you might still have a physical building, but it's not going to be logically there, in the sense that you've got so many people not in that physical building, so many people remotely working using different tools, that you're going to have to think of your enterprise as not having any form of physical control, not having any control over what devices are connecting to your network, etc. So we're going to see, I think we'll see a growth in tools that deal with management of device, heterogeneous IT real estate that's not under the control of the corporate.
I'm also very curious over the idea of a cloud VPN for corporations. Mm-hmm. I think that's going to be a very fascinating transition, because a lot of people don't realize that VPNs are predominantly hardware sitting on a network. And I think if you're not an IT person, people think of a VPN, they go, yeah, the thing I hit on my phone, right? That's like sitting somewhere. And as we transition to the cloud, and as infrastructure becomes a bit more scarce, and you're going into data centers, you're going into AWS, that idea of a cloud VPN is going to start to be a very, very big thing. I've been really impressed with Google, though. I thought of all companies that kind of do remote, and kind of run small to mid-sized businesses, Google has really stepped up. So they've changed Hangouts. They've now called it Google Meet. Google Meet can host up to 250 people. I did one a few days ago where I had probably around 80 or 90 people on there. No issues. It was actually really, really good. And their G Suite product and some of the internal Google tools that they've now put out has just been fascinating.
I know, I think in some meetings we've been using Google Meet for about a year. That's because that was the commercial side of the Hangout, and it was just so much better product. I mean, it was just really, really nice. Of course, it's nice to see Zoom doing well, because we're doing better in terms of security, because I think they've got a better API. I haven't been impressed with Skype at all, but there we go. I think these tools are going to be used more.
Have you found anyone impressed with Skype? I've stopped using Skype like 6 years ago.
I know. Even Skype for Business, I'm not impressed with. I just find it's bad using the interface, and it's just a bit clunky. Hey,
Microsoft, here's a pitch. Stick to Teams. Transition Skype into Teams and just get it over with.
I think that's what they're trying to do, but I think it's taken them a while.
It is. It's the adoption of so many people being on Skype, and getting them over to Teams requires a subscription to Microsoft, and a lot of people on Skype don't have a Microsoft subscription to begin with. And so they have to kind of figure that piece out. Kind of looking at just the general kind of your view on how, when you look at COVID-19 from a privacy issue we've discussed, how do you look at COVID-19 from a threat issue? How are you getting any feedback of and are you guys seeing these contact tracing apps become targets for nation states to acquire data on people? Is that a big concern? Is that something you guys addressed in your letter?
We don't address, with the DP3T, there is no way you can use it to the DP3T protocol to collect information on people. What we are seeing, though, is we're seeing a lot of confusion by bad branding, bad government information to their population. Like saying, "Oh, our app's going to be called X," and then country Y has an app of the same name. And then we saw today that, I can't remember which European country, apparently the biggest thing in the app store for that European country was to go download an app for another European country. And you go like, no, this is just, this is not going to work. So there's a lot of disinformation. I think there's also a lot of disinformation out there. If the usual disinformation we have, like the standard stuff that we've seen on Facebook and Twitter and stuff over the last few years, the disinformation, trying people to question scientific advice, with anti-vaccine movements, etc. And we're seeing that, but you're seeing a lot of disinformation about the technology that could help us get out of the out of the crisis. So, for example, issues with social distancing. You've seen a lot of disinformation about social distancing to try and get the population a bit more rebellious, and these are actors who are trying to destabilize the West, for want of a better word.
Yeah, there's been a lot of misinformation. In fact, I think there was a recent U.S. report that said that China was responsible in January and February for a ton of misinformation around COVID-19 in the U.S. That may have discounted government's ability to really go in and address it early on. And that's not just in the U.S., but that can be said for Europe and other parts of the world where, because of that misinformation, people waited longer, and this thing really became what it is, which is now transformed the world once again.
Yeah.
And
But we're also seeing a lot of scams. There's a lot of online scams out there. Basically any excuse for anyone to make a buck, and they're going to make a buck. There's things I was seeing yesterday, people selling, COVID-19 testing. There was one that was a prayer liquid I saw that was going, like you download this, you could go online, you can buy holy water that will cure you from COVID-19, and there's a lot of this, and I think part of the problem is that there's so much this going on, and it's very hard. The tech companies, Facebook and Twitter and the other companies that are pushing, the ad companies, the Googles of this world, are trying to stamp down on this. But you've also got the local police forces in every country trying to stamp down on this. And I think this all part of this. There's deliberate misinformation, maybe on a nation-state basis, but there's also, I won't call them entrepreneurs, con artists, doing huckster, like selling, the old potion bottles that they would have sold in the Wild West.
do you feel like there's going to be an inherent change in the way people look at now encryption and key management in the world of remote work, kind of taken away from some of that?
Yeah, I think, so we've already seen that. So with Unbound, we've been doing this stuff with what we call crypto of things, which is like Internet of Things, but with crypto. And then you kind of you have this thing where you have we're having all these bring your own devices, or these small devices that connect to the internet. Hello, cat. And
folks, we have a cat appearance on the Tech Corner show.
We have the cat. Hello, you're on telly.
The cat just wants in. I love it. It'd be good if the tail smacked you in the face.
Yeah. So you have this crypto that has to be in the cloud, but also has to be on device, and the device the corporation doesn't control, the cloud the corporation doesn't control, but you want to control your own keys and be able to do distribution. So this is going to create interesting new cryptographic stuff that luckily we kind of predicted would happen. So without COVID-19, but I think it's just going to accelerate this change.
Yeah, it's been very fascinating to see how specific aspects of key management, I think, have changed for a lot of organizations, simply because the old way of doing it doesn't work anymore.
Yeah, you don't have a basement where you hold your keys.
You don't. You also don't have one, offline cold storage computer that you can go to grab your keys or there's so many.
Yeah, exactly.
I like to call them medieval ways of key management and encryption and provisioning, and you can't do it anymore. It's not feasible, and so kind of this idea of key management and upgrading it, especially on the crypto side, because I felt like blockchain for a while was kind of front and center, and then it kind of, I don't want to say died. It didn't die, but it kind of went away.
I think it's kind of gone. I think blockchain is kind of there, but it's kind of addressing different things. It's not doing cryptocurrency, but I think
beyond cryptocurrency.
Yeah. It's doing other things. It's no longer. Yeah, it's kind of doing. The kind of focus is now moved onto other things.
But how amazing would blockchain be for healthcare right now?
What, you put all of your healthcare on the blockchain?
If you did a private chain.
If you did a
private chain. I mean, if the World Health Organization wasn't bought by China and they were halfway smart, they would have done that a while ago.
Yeah, but it's just a database.
It is, although it'd be far more. I thought it would be far more effective if it was on the blockchain. it allow you to get that database and really work it and be able to trace it and see it spread and so forth. I mean, there's use cases for blockchain in healthcare.
Yeah. But they're kind of, you have to be
a doctor to do that.
Yeah, narrow it down to the right one. Blockchain does not solve everything.
No, it doesn't. Although when it first came out, I remember people saying blockchain's going to be the new MySQL, and I'm like, no, it's not.
No, it's not.
It's not. But okay. I mean, it's good to dream. Who am I to crush someone's dreams? Yeah. Who are we to do that? Nigel, kind of as we wrap up here, a quick question for you. And kind of summarizing this whole thing up, what are some of your key lessons that you've taken away from a privacy perspective from this COVID-19 thing?
Okay, so a great lesson we've learned, which was when we did the media blitz to try and change the countries in Europe's view on going from centralized solutions to decentralized solutions, is that when the community tried to react against the problems that were revealed with the Snowden environment, revelations, people were very slow to react. Now, actually, we're much more organized. We got everything ready. We had a solution. We could easily write a letter. We got 500 people to sign it in the end, more than that. And we got it out into the press, and we actually changed government policies in different countries. So I think privacy is now much more central. People realize that technology on its own, the technologists can't just talk to themselves. They have to talk to the wider society. So on our team, DP3T, we have people who are legal experts, people who are used to talking to politicians in the European Parliament, and they spend a lot of time doing media. So it's a much more, to protect people's privacy, technologists can't just use technology and just talk to each other. You have to be wider, you have to get out there. And and just the number of interviews everyone's done over the last 2 weeks is, okay, we've got nothing else to do because we're all at home, so we're all on Zoom doing interviews with people. But, I'm just kind of like one after another, talking to different people, getting the message across that privacy is important, and that whilst stopping COVID-19 in its tracks is important, we don't want to stop it in its tracks and then get some sort of totalitarian Big Brother state.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think once you give government power, once you give man power over other man, they tend to abuse that power and they don't give it back. And any notion that government could give something back is false. And there's so many examples of that in our history. From 9/11 to the Great Depression. The Great Depression was a perfect example of socialized, of government trying to run economies for recovery, and that failed miserably. If it wasn't for World War II, the world would have still been in depression. I think most people forget the fact that if it wasn't, it's terrible to say that because of the amount of people that died in World War II is over 100 million people. We talk about the Holocaust, but the amount of people that died from civilians and soldiers in that war, I was watching a video and it was over 100 million. I mean, the Russian army alone suffered like 20 million losses.
Yeah.
So, like Russia, don't like Russia. They lost 20 million people in World War II. That's why they celebrate that Russia doesn't have an Independence Day. When I was in Russia, I was very surprised that they don't have an Independence Day because they've never been conquered.
Yes.
But their Independence Day-like celebration is the day they defeated the Nazis.
Yeah, it's May the 8th or 9th.
Whichever
one they celebrate.
It's coming up next week. And I have a lot of friends in Russia, and so it's been very fascinating to kind of, when you understand the Russian culture. And so you look at that and you realize government didn't do a very good job getting us out of the Great Depression. If it wasn't for a world war, the Depression would have probably lasted another decade or so.
Yeah.
And so the World War really sped it up, revamped it, changed economies, changed and so forth, and created really a new world order. And now we're seeing that happen all over again. Once a decade, once a century, there's always something that changes something for the next century. We've been privy and privileged to see COVID-19 be that driving force.
You're calling it a privilege.
I am calling it a privilege. I'm not discounting the loss of life. I'm not discounting the financial and economic crisis of this thing. But our great-grandparents lived through the Spanish flu and the Great Depression and then World War II. Mm-hmm. Our great-grandparents.
Yeah, I see. No, see, that's my grandparents. I'm a bit older than you, obviously.
So my grandparents were born right around the Spanish flu.
See, my grandparents were born at the turn of the century.
See, so there's about a 2-decade difference between us there. But you know, you speak to them. They were kids when the Spanish flu happened. They were kids when the Depression happened, and they were young adults, if not in, just starting their families during World War II. Mm-hmm. And so they went through 3 consecutive crises a decade. We've gone through a predominantly financial, we've been through mini wars, not a world war, right? We've had the Gulf War, we've had, what went on in Afghanistan and at post 9/11 and the war on terror. But we haven't had that de facto change, and that de facto change for us, even beyond the economic collapse of 2008 and so forth, and the dot-com crash, is this. And we're watching the world change, a once-in-a-century kind of change, and I think it's a privilege to be a part of it, because not a lot of people get to do that. There's generations that have missed it.
I'd rather not bring in where the gaps.
I want to be that voice, and so I'm excited about it. I'm hoping all this content that we've done during COVID-19 will be some way to kind of like the journals from World War II and the Great Depression, those diary entries that you read of people going through that period of time. I'm hoping these podcasts now are just that, because God knows everything else just isn't. So let's just do that. So Nigel, it's been a pleasure, man. Thank you for coming on our inaugural Tech Corner.
That's good. I hope it goes well. Obviously, you've started with a bang. You're going to have a real problem trying to find someone with
getting
better
some.
Shirts. You're going to find a problem with someone with better shirts for future episodes.
I've been told that I should stop wearing black T-shirts, and I've told someone, you find me a different color on screen, and I'll not wear it. I won't wear red. I won't wear green. I won't wear blue. I can't wear white. I hate white on camera. I just feel like white on camera is terrible. I like black, and my color is black. I don't understand why people don't like black. I don't get it. Well, folks, kind of signing off here for us here at Tech Corner on our inaugural episode. Thanks so much for tuning in. Dr. Nigel Smart with Unbound Tech. You guys should definitely go check out unboundtech.com for key management solutions. Really, they're great partners in this process. They're not just a one-size-fits-all kind of solution. They're really looking to study how you operate your business. And Nigel and I spent some time, and you can go back to our episode from 2 months ago at RSA, where we really spoke about the vision of Unbound Tech and how Nigel and Yuta started the company and where it's gone since. And there's incredible value in understanding how a company starts and its leadership, because as we've all seen, nations that have handled this crisis well had great leadership, and nations that have struggled have had bad leadership. And so leadership is everything, folks. And Unbound Tech does have great leadership. So with that being said, make sure you follow us on LinkedIn, subscribe on our YouTube channel, subscribe to the CyberHub podcast on your favorite podcast listening platform, folks. Until next time, this is James Azar signing out.